Thanks. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope that you had a good night's sleep and that you also had some time to enjoy Rome. You know, they say that all the roads take you to Rome, and apparently you have taken one of those roads now. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anssi Pekkarinen. I, as obvious, work for the Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, and my responsibilities here have to do with the Global Forest Resources Assessment. And I will do my best to give you a brief introduction what the Global Forest Resources Assessment is and what is going on at the moment in this field of work in the organization. And my presentation will be followed by that of Mr. Julian Fox, who will tell you about the REDD Plus and National Forest Monitoring activities. Needless to say, these two are very, very interlinked. What we do in FRA is supported by what Julian and his team does. First of all, why do we do this? Global Forest Resources Assessment and collection of forest-related statistical information is something that is in the constitution of FAO, and we have done this from the very beginning of the organization's establishment. And in fact, last year, FRA, the Global Forest Resources Assessment, had its 70th birthday, so 70 years of activities in this field. FRA is based on the work that is done in the countries. We have a network of national correspondents that cover 180 countries and territories in the current assessment. These national correspondents are responsible for filling in the FRA questionnaire for their countries with the official information on forest resources that they have. I have to emphasize that these persons and this network is the cornerstone of the whole exercise. In addition to that, in addition to these country reports and this network, we do use remote sensing as well in two different ways. First, we use remote sensing to produce independent reference data at regional and global level, against which we can compare the aggregates that have been produced using the country data. In addition, we use remote sensing to help those countries that don't have good information on their forest resources to produce that information. Although I just said that we have 180 countries and territories covered by this national correspondent network, there are some countries for which we, for reason or another, on some countries and territories, we don't have the national correspondent, and for those countries we also do so-called desk studies. That means that the FAO and FRA Secretariat actually conducts a survey, literature survey and remote sensing-based survey, depending on the situation, to produce that information, so that we have a global data set that is consistent. Well, why is India then important in this exercise? Of course, India is among the 10 countries that have most of the forest area, and in addition to that, India is one of the top 10 countries where there has been a greatest annual net gain in forest area. In addition to that, we have some Indian colleagues that you may recognize. Director General Dasgupta is in the FRA advisory group, also contributing to giving guidance to the FRA process. When we talk about the Global Forest Resources Assessment, it's very important to remember that regardless of the fact that many people are mainly interested in forest area, FRA is much more than forest area assessment. In fact, we cover all the thematic elements of sustainable forest management. We look at the extent of forest area, of course, land tenure, access rights, sustainable forest management, legal and institutional frameworks, and much more. I already mentioned that FRA turned 70 years last year, and the current ongoing assessment is FRA 2020. That means that the results will be published next year. But what is then new in this exercise? What have we done to make FRA better, we hope, than what it was before? First of all, we have worked on new reporting tools. We have made it easier for the countries to report, to access the reporting tables and to fill in the reporting information. This is a screenshot from our tool that we call the FRA platform. In the left-hand side of this screen, you can see the FRA reporting tables. On the top right, you can see something that we call the national data point entry. This means that the countries can actually store their national inventory data in the system, in the sense that you can see that when the data was actually collected. In addition, the new platform comes with a number of different interpolation tools for forest area estimates, for example, biomass, carbon, and etc. So the intention here is to make the reporting easier and also to improve the consistency of the estimates that the countries add to the system. This is an example of the biomass calculator. It's basically an Excel application that uses the IPCC default values. It's basically just giving those countries that don't have their own system in place the possibility to calculate these estimates rather easily using the forest area and growing stock information. We have also done a lot of work in integrating the geospatial information and tools into this reporting platform. Now all the national correspondents and their collaborators, which are usually many, can, through this platform, access the latest geospatial, freely available geospatial information, being the satellite images, being the latest forest information products, being, for example, the famous Matt Hansen tree cover product, other forest maps or tree cover maps, burnt area as map, and also in the near future as statistics and graphs. Then this information also comes from remote sensing-based assessments. We have added some other geospatial layers as well, including the mangroves maps, etc. So the intention here is to give this network access to the best possible data and information that we have from the geospatial platforms and initiatives. Furthermore, we are not working in isolation. We are working with a number of partners, and it's very important to emphasize the FRA's role also in collecting and reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals. FRA is the vehicle to collect the data for Sustainable Development Goals 15.1.1, which is proportion of forest area, of land area, and the 15.2.1, which is about sustainable forest management with 5 sub-indicators. We, some years ago, established a collaborative forest resources questionnaire with a number of partners. The main idea there was to reduce the reporting burden by working together with those organizations that also collect the data. So now, instead of these organizations sending their own questionnaires to the countries, we actually collect the data jointly through the FRA exercise. We are also working with the collaborative partnership on forest to develop a global core set of forest-related indicators. First phase of this work was completed last week, and again the idea is the same. We want to identify a set of indicators that we could commonly use by different organizations in different contexts and using the same terms and definitions. Finally, this is an illustration of the kind of landscape where we work. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have the major Rio conventions. On the right-hand side, you can see the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire partners. On the top, you can see the SDGs and UNFF linkages, and in the bottom, our collaboration with the UN-RED and the FLEG teams here at the FAO. In addition, we work with a number of other institutional partners, including NASA Severe, which is NASA's capacity development program, Google, which you might know, Joint Research Center of the European Commission, World Conservation Monitoring Center of UN Environment, and some Swedish universities, Natural Resources Institute of Finland, JASA from Austria, and so on and so forth. Very important part of every FRA process is the network and capacity development. This time, for the FRA 2020, we started, as we usually do, with an expert consultation. We invite experts from all over the world to discuss the scopes of the next assessment, discuss the terms and definitions, and so on and so forth. This meeting took place in Joensuu, Finland, and again I would like to thank Director General for having participated in this exercise. Again, we had the global launch in Mexico. Here we brought together all the national correspondents and trained them to use the reporting tools and trained them on the reporting contents and methodology. And we proceeded with 9 different regional workshops all over the world, including one in India, where we further trained the national correspondents and helped them to complete the reports. So what is happening next then? We are currently still reviewing the data entered by the countries, entered by that network of national correspondents. We will complete that review by the end of March. After that, we will start the analysis and reporting, and we will send these country reports again to the heads of forestry, as they are called, the highest forest authority in the countries, for the final OK, final green light for the publishing. And then in June 2020, we will have the next FRA report out. Meanwhile, we have also started with a completely new initiative. We are conducting a global remote sensing survey, which is done in a participatory manner. That means that this is a sample-based survey, so we have 430,000 location samples all over the globe, which will be assessed in 30 different workshops involving 600 participants all over the world again. And these participants will do the assessment of these samples using visual interpretation. Why are we doing this way? Because the most important thing and the most added value that we can bring to this remote sensing survey comes from the national experts. Because to be able to interpret these images in a reliable way, you have to know the landscape. And you don't know the landscape if you don't come from that area. And again, I would like to specifically thank Forest Survey of India for their support in this exercise. These pictures are actually from this week, and my colleagues Adolfo Kinkard and Valeria Contessa are currently in Dehradun, India, conducting or finalizing this workshop. And they also did the field visit, as you can see. Colleagues, I think that I have used my time. Many thanks for your attention.
Any question from your side?
Good morning, sir. Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
This state of forest report, the World State of Forest report is prepared, and just I'm looking at 2018 report. So, sir, how do you prepare this using the which kind of sensors, or there are so many satellites that are helping monitoring the forest resources in the world?
Thank you. Thank you. That's an excellent question. There's there's a huge amount of information out there, especially the different satellites, different sensors, different resolutions, etc. And we actually spent quite a lot of time trying to understand what would be the best approach in doing this. So what we are using in this assessment is Sentinel data from the European Union Copernicus program, plus the Landsat data from NASA. These are the two main sources of information. Why are we doing that? These data are available free of charge, and these data actually cover a long time period. So to do the assessment of changes, we are using Landsat to make sure that we have consistent data for all the years for which the assessment is being done. Thank you.
So, in the process of making this forest resource assessment report, there are two scenarios. One where there is a national reporting agency, and the other is where there is no reporting agency because they don't have capacity or maybe their own sensors or satellites. Mm-hmm. So how do you cross-check the first scenario, that when do you have, because there's a tendency of under-reporting or over-reporting, right? So do you just believe in them or in their quality assurance parameters, or do you have any of your own cross-checks? And the second scenario, you do your own analysis and include that in report. Thank you.
Okay. We trust that the national authorities know best what they have in their territory. And what we do in the FRA process is that we try to support them in any way we can to produce the best possible information. The way the process works is, as I said, this network of national correspondents, they fill in the FRA questionnaires. After that, when they have completed the questionnaire, they send that to the FRA Secretariat, and we go through all the different tables, all the different explanations, and all the different data sources, do a comprehensive review and give our feedback to the national correspondents. I think that in most of the cases there is a few times back and forth before the report is being completed. And this is being done to make sure that the national correspondent, who may be a new one, has understood the reporting methodology, and that the data that is being used to fill in the report has been reported in a transparent manner in the report. So that's how it works. This checking of the report is being done during this review process. Second, what comes to those areas or those countries and territories where they don't have the necessary capacity, we have two scenarios, basically, two different possibilities. One, they didn't even nominate a national correspondent for a reason or another, and then we need to conduct what I called earlier a desk study. That means that we will do here at the FAO, FRA Secretariat will do a literature review. We will maybe use, depending on the size of the country and the forest resources there, we will do a remote sensing, we will conduct a remote sensing survey of our own. We will fill in the tables, and again, we will send them to the head of forestry in the country for their review. In case they do have a national correspondent, then again, we will try to support the national correspondent the best way we can to fill in the report.
Sir, in forest resource assessment, you are measuring only green cover or green cover along with wildlife diversity and species diversity of the particular region, because it is very important when you have resources and you have to use best of that resources in practice. So it is only green cover or green cover along with wildlife resource and species biodiversity and all these things comes in.
Sorry, I'm not 100% sure that I understand that. Is it about the green cover or?
It is only trees, means biomass, or it is biomass along with wildlife diversity, and then
Right.
in particular species diversity, which species are in that region. So it can be used in best optimum way. That is resource. Resource can be used a best way.
Okay, thank you. We are looking at the different aspects. As I said, the FRA is not only about the, let's say, a forest area and biomass and carbon stock and growing stock. It also looks into the, protected areas, forest management plans. We are looking at the employment. We are looking at the education. But having said that, I think that there's still room for improvement in the sense that we should have more socioeconomic data and understanding of the underlying socioeconomy in the countries and the role of forests in that. But one thing that is the brutal truth is that this is a global exercise. And many of the countries still don't have good data. And I think that it will take still many, many years before we really reach the ambitious objective to have good data for all the countries and territories in the world on this aspect as well.
Just to what Anssi has just said, is that, it's basically on forest resource assessment. We're not looking at the wildlife per se, which your question was.
Exactly.
So he wants that even wildlife aspect should also come in. That will take time because, as Anssi has very specifically mentioned, that from 1948 till now, 70 years down the line, if you see the number of countries, I think initially there were only about 20, 24 odd countries which participated. Today we have 180 countries. Even now, there is a huge data gap in many of the countries, only on the forest resources, leave alone wildlife and other things. And the level, from since 48 till now, you'll see that the number of information which is being collected through different countries has also increased over the years. As a huge exercise, it takes, earlier it used to come out once 10 years, now the FAO is doing it once in 5 years. So it's a huge exercise comprising of national correspondents from most of the countries. Some of the countries like India have a very robust inventory system in place, have a very well-defined remote sensing database with us. So that's not a problem. These countries also help other countries in and around India. India can become a lead in, and it is already a lead in the sub-region, in sub-regional Asia. It helps other countries which do not have a very good database, and it also helps in training the national correspondents from those countries at India with the help of FAO. So it's a very complicated and extended exercise. But if you just go through the database, you'll find that over the years how GFRA has evolved. And as Anssi has promised, the FRA 2020 will be the best one produced.
Okay, if no further comments on this very important issue, of course we are all waiting for the FRA 2020. Just to add the very importance of the collaborative forest resources questionnaire that with the aim to avoid unnecessary burden to the same people that receive from different international organizations, same requests with different definitions, different time moment, and so on. So I think this was an important step forward to align reporting and really concentrate on the substance of good data. The importance, of course, of remote sensing that may calibrate globally and regionally that the data provided bottom-up are consistent. So it's not just a bottom-up, it's not just a top-down, it's a mixed approach, which is very interesting in order to check the accuracy of the data. The fact that in the UN statistics, forests have been provided by FRA since the very first dates of the UN, and now the correspondent indicators of the SDGs. The importance of the linkage as the bottom-up approach is substantive. If you have weak national forest monitoring systems, then at the end you will have poor FRA data. So it's very important to strengthen, and there's been, thanks RED+, a lot of resources in these past decades to improve the quality of the national forest monitoring system. So there we have to put also important focus. There are always some technological problems, cloud forests, poor coverage forests, which are in drylands very important, and they respond very poorly, but also technology is moving forward. And finally, it's important that we don't keep just on the National Forest Monitoring and Assessment, which is the most costly element. At the end, we need National Forest Information Systems. It's very important that we, in parallel, mine statistics and information that are dispersed around, especially in the socioeconomic area. It's not necessary always to create it from scratch. They are dispersed in other national statistics, and it's important, be trade, be occupation, be livelihoods and whatever, to do the effort to pick it in, to not confuse the other especially the biophysical monitoring system as the issue. And there are different timelines. I mean, forest fires you can measure every year, trade you can measure every year, employment as well. There are issues like the biophysical that need much more time to do any regional investment. So at the end, having really compacting everything in a consistent national inventory information system that allows policy decision makers to take the right decisions. But I think we all look forward to FRA 2020 that will, as a comment, be coming out in next COFO. So it's a good opportunity next June, whoever can come to see the data that will show up. And just to recall why we have in the market other data, basically because they do not do this checking that Anssi was commenting on the ground. Every forest you lose, it can be a deforestation, it can be just a clear cutting of a normal forestry. And if you don't work this fine-tuning, just calculate it automatically from remote sensing, might be very less costly, but having a big bias that you overestimate deforestation and so on. So, and you have as well, by many of the information that have been published recently, Song and others, they put all the vegetation. Of course, FAO does just the forest. We have the trees out of forest, very important in your country, or in Ethiopia. We have the rest of the vegetation that is also an important issue. So in order that you understand why there are some different figures, there are as well good reasons, and we have to be able to cope with it and communicate and make clear why the results seem not to be consistent, but eventually they are more consistent than we think, while taking into account all these caveats.
Yeah, thank you, Eduardo. This is exactly the reason why we are doing this remote sensing survey in a participatory manner, because for the local experts it's much easier to understand the land use behind the changes in the land cover.